Bowman has pretty much a long career in Columbus, Ohio. Master's degree focused on epidemiology and pork pre-harvest food safety. A DVM and following that PhD degree in the field of comparative veterinary medicine. His research interest includes ecology and epidemiology of influenza A viruses in swine and avian species. He's recognized nationally, served with one of the national centers of excellence for influenza research and surveillance, the Sears Network. He is a subject matter expert to the swine exhibition, zoonotic influenza working group of the National Assembly of State Animal Health Officials and the National Association of State Public Health Veterinarians. I met him because of his involvement with a group that I have served with, the organizing committees for the neglected influenza viruses, which includes things like equine flu and swine flu, and Andy is the local host for the next meeting of that group coming up in Columbus in a few months' time, and so it's a great honor to have you down here today.
Hopefully my power doesn't die. All right, thank you so much for having me. As you can see, we're going to talk about flu today in pigs, and specifically we're going to talk about the unique creature of show pigs, which the unique subset, and we'll kind of get to that. So undoubtedly I'll forget to thank everyone. So I put it up front, right, that I'm just the talking head today. There's a whole bunch of people behind the scenes making all this stuff work. And so team back at the lab, collaborators, we've got a lot of folks, whether it's in Ohio or across kind of the eastern Midwest. The vast majority of this funding is coming from the Sears Network, as Dr. Chambers mentioned. And so we were part of the St. Jude Center, and certainly that's where a lot of this comes from. Although we've also had additional funding tossed in from National Pork Board, CSD, and CDC. So just nomenclature, I'll probably drift into IAV or flu, but just realize we've tried to remove the term swine influenza virus. Right? That's not technically a recognized virus for us, and so we're trying to use the correct term IAV or influenza A virus in swine. Right? It could be in any species. And so 2009 pandemic got called all sorts of nasty things. Realized the proper term for it is PDM09 virus. And when I use the term variant virus, this is something we've kind of agreed on with WHO and OIE. Variant meaning an animal lineage virus that's infected a person. Right? So the swine industry kind of took an economic bath in 2009 when we had the virus being called swine flu. And so there was a lot of work around how do we designate that in a term that won't be quite so damaging to the pork industry. And so variant is what we've settled on. So variant in this case is going to mean a human infected with a swine lineage virus. So, right, the problem is show pigs get flu, and we'll dive into this a little bit. But right, we know that show pigs get flu. We don't have sound. That's all right. Right. So we get these kind of outbreaks of pigs with respiratory disease. There you guys see one with a barking cough. We got nasal discharge. Right. Maybe we're going to have some other associated signs with it, but nonetheless, right, we've got pigs with flu, and so yeah, that's a problem if I'm an exhibitor, right, and then my pigs are sick. Maybe they're not going to perform as well in the show ring, but beyond that, we have a bigger issue in that we could have virus transmit onto people, right? And so we've had this happen, right? These headlines keep showing up year after year, and we get these things where we've got folks getting infected with influenza at county fairs, right? So realize that this is not good, right? Whether you're on the commercial side and people start to associate pigs with flu infections, or in general, like the fairs are not happy with these sorts of these outbreaks, right? And then we get these kind of sensationalized titles that might even make life a little bit worse. So certainly a problem for agriculture, also a problem for public health, as we now have folks becoming infected with these variant viruses. Just for the non-influenza people, right? What's the big deal here? What's the problem? Remember that every influenza pandemic has originated from animals, right? So every flu virus in you and me that we are passing around now in the middle of flu season, we can trace back to an introduction from animals, whether that's 1918, take your pick. All the pandemics have come from animals, right? And then once they become established in the human population, they become our seasonal strains, and we live with them until the next one is introduced, and right, so on and so forth. Nonetheless, right, they're all coming from animals, so the animal reservoir is important to us, or at least from the human health side. It also means that when we have these occur, right, when we have an animal introduction into humans, we have to report it to the world community. And after a while, the world community says, there's something wrong with the U.S. that you keep having all these introductions from pigs into people, especially at county fairs. So if we step back to the wider view, if you don't know, birds are the root of all evil and flu, right? That's kind of the dogma, right? That wild birds harbor most of the diversity of flu viruses. From there, we believe that we have virus spillover into poultry. That switch would go from an enteric infection to a respiratory infection. From there, right, into a lower mammal, potentially swine, and then on to humans. Certainly, we've got spillover going other ways. We know we've got plenty of flu viruses in other species. For the most part, we're not seeing those introductions into humans, and so from a human health side, right, this idea of what's in pigs and what's in humans really are intertwined together, and the 2009 pandemic really highlighted that fact. So if we're looking at the introductions that have occurred in the U.S., right, we've had more than 480 infections of variant viruses. Remember, variant meaning swine lineage into humans. And the vast majority of those are occurring at agricultural fairs. Right, so who's been to a county fair? Everybody's been to a county fair, right? We all love county fairs, right? And we, for the most part, don't think about this idea, right, of influenza transmission that can be occurring. So we get some of these, right, this was a county fair in Ohio. I think the police caution tape really adds a nice effect, right? So that was a state veterinarian imposed quarantine on the barn. They had some animals test positive for flu. The local producers said, we're taking our pigs home, they're worth too much money. And then it turned into a power struggle, which was ultimately enforced by local law enforcement that the pigs were not leaving. However, they still let people go in and play in the barn, and right, the whole zoonotic transmission occurred. If we think about kind of what we have in the setting, right, we have a very unique animal-human interface that we really don't get elsewhere, right? So Lexi here celebrating her 13th birthday, right, face-to-face with a pig, is not how the vast majority of 13-year-olds in this country, right, celebrate their birthday. And so we really get this unique interface, and coronavirus might be a good example of this, right? We talk about Southeast Asia is going to be where we have these transmissions occur. We don't interact with animals the way live animal markets happen elsewhere in the world. Well, we might, right? We might, especially in these settings, at county fairs. So exhibition swine, if you're not familiar with exhibition swine, right, they really are this unique setting, right? So they're non-commercial swine. They're being raised for youth education programs, 4-H FFA for the most part. And then think about what we do at a county fair, right? It's multi-source pigs. We commingle them in a location, and then we invite the public in. Actually, often we charge the public to come into that environment, right? And then we wonder, why do we have zoonotic transmission occurring, right? I mean, it's exactly what in the infectious disease world would say not to do, right? From a commercial swine aspect, we educate producers up one side and down the other not to do these things, right? This is like violates every tenet of biosecurity that we teach yet here we do it on public display, right? And it just creates this perfect storm of a way to bring viruses from multiple farms to one spot, amplify them up. A lot of people, roughly 150 million people, attend agricultural fairs in North America every year, right? Mix it all together, and we get zoonotic transmission. So my lab, we've been studying flu viruses since 2009, right? 2009 pandemic came along, and we realized nobody's really looking at flu viruses in pigs. Everyone was looking at birds, and so we said, where can we get our hands on pigs quickly? And we decided county fair was a good spot. Turns out, right, we get this whole other piece to it that we never even thought about. But we know it's about 25% of the fairs we go to every year have pigs shedding flu virus. We go to 100 or so fairs every year, and so right, we have the likely suspects, but nonetheless, right, we find plenty of flu at the fairs. We also know that when we find a fair with a positive pig, right, it's usually not just one pig. It's like greater than 60% of the pigs are testing positive, and we'll talk about that in a second. We also know that most of the pigs aren't showing clinical signs, right? So my lab group, when we come home from a fair on our way home, we play a fun little game of flu or no flu. That's how exciting my life is. And we're really bad. We're really, really bad. And you would think we'd be decent because we see a lot of pigs with flu, but we don't. Times I promise it's going to be flu and it's not, and times I think there's nothing there and every single pig tests positive. So the idea that we have visual inspection, right, which is what an awful lot of folks have. They have a veterinarian on staff, on site who's doing visual inspection daily. That we're going to catch these infected pigs. We just probably are not going to do that with that system. So if we kind of look across our major study areas, 2019 is just in the book, so I didn't include it. But if we started in Ohio, right? You can see each state. Yes, Kentucky's on the board. Your numbers are kind of scary, but we're going to big places, so don't worry about that too much. Nonetheless, right, you can see that we're picking up flu, and right, if you want to go to where the problem really is, it's Indiana. But right, nonetheless, right, we've got plenty of flu occurring out there. Some of those states, right, we're at a state fair, we're at a large show, those sorts of things, and that's why we're picking up, a high percentage of the shows testing positive. Nonetheless, right, we get up years, we get down years, but we still have flu in these environments just about every single year. So our typical timeline, if you don't know about a fair, right, animals are going to come in, they're going to have some sort of entry period and a process where we maybe have to ID pigs, we're going to weigh pigs, the show is going to happen, and then we come in and sample at the end, probably after the sale, but before the pigs depart. So this allows us a chance for the virus to amplify up, right? So I don't have to sample as many animals to try to find virus, because I'm going to let it spread through that population. The second is that if you know anything about the show world, right, as soon as I touch that pig and it doesn't win, it's my fault, right? And so I don't want to, I wiped its nose and now it's lame on its right rear, clearly my fault. But, right, to avoid all that, we sample at the end. Our gold standard really has been nasal swabs. However, you've seen some of our studies, right, we get less buy-in because we're going to have to restrain a pig to do that. So we've adopted snout wipes, which you kind of saw there in the video. We're just wiping the snout with cotton gauze for those samplings. So, right, we kind of get the deal. If you look at the human cases, we have an awful lot of human cases in Ohio, Indiana, Southern Tier, Michigan, right? And why is that? We've taken a beating on why aren't you doing more surveillance in Iowa? Like we all know that's where all the real pigs are. They're all in Iowa. Right? You should be out there in Iowa. So, right, I had a grad student work on that problem. And so we surveyed county fairs, every county fair across Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, and used that to then interpolate where we think the density of show pigs are, at least in the Midwest, and then compare it to the total swine inventories reported by USDA. Right? You can see we've got a totally different distribution. We've got a lot of pigs in Iowa, and then kind of tails back towards the eastern Midwest. If you go the other way, right? Look at the show pigs, and just kind of based on how many pigs we're getting at a county fair, right? Now we start to get some idea as to why we kind of see this focus on the eastern Midwest for these zoonotic cases. The variant influenza cases tend to pop up in this region. It's because we have an awful lot of pigs at county fair. We also have an awful lot of show pigs, and they move, and we'll see that in a second. So, right, commercial swine would like to wipe their hands of this and say, this is a weird show pig problem. We told you we shouldn't have show pigs, right? And right, that's their own problem. They have to deal with it. Not to mention, I can't give a flu talk without a phylogeny, so right, that's an international regulation. So here it is. If we look at this, right, commercial swine are highlighted in red and green, and so all the viruses coming out of USDA surveillance are red and green in this thing, and then the exhibition swine lineages are in blue and purple. And right, the backbone of this really is commercial swine, right? They're maintaining an awful lot of this virus, but then we get these spillover. So if you take a look at that lineage, right, we have a lineage that clearly ended up into exhibition swine that spreads through exhibition swine. We think it's an exhibition swine lineage, right up until we hit that tip, right? And now it's back into commercial swine. So, right, we're passing viruses back and forth between exhibition swine and commercial swine, and then if we think about all the reassortment that may occur, especially through either system, whether that's commercial in movements, long-scale movements, or whether that's an exhibition swine, lots of pigs in one source, and reassortment events that occur at a fair. Nonetheless, right, it's kind of this giant game of who's giving what to whom, but all the viruses are linked to each other, and so the finger pointing probably kind of needs to stop in that whole thing. The public health response, right, generally has been, well, then just cancel the pig shows, right? I mean, which is I can understand, right? If you have the issue of everyone's getting infected, right, we have to keep telling the world that we're getting people infected with swine lineage viruses at agricultural fairs. Let's just stop showing pigs at fairs, right? And so we've had to argue pretty hard that agricultural fairs actually are a strong part of U.S. culture, right? We know that they're family events. In rural communities, right, we shut down the entire town when the county fair is occurring. And this really is a chance to do some agricultural education, talk about how things have progressed. And so that's kind of been the message we've held, but we've also promoted the idea that we might be able to do some things differently to hold some of these events in maybe a more responsible manner, so we don't have quite so much zoonotic transmission occurring. So, kind of out of the outbreak, initially the big outbreak in 2012, a group got together, so between NASAHO and ASPHB got together and kind of drafted this idea of guidelines, and we crafted them carefully not to call them guidelines, but they end up kind of being right. So the measures to minimize document, we had all sorts of industry stakeholders involved in this thing, and we wrote up a thing, a document that we could kind of pass out to fairs, pass out to exhibitors, things that we could do to minimize influenza transmission at swine exhibitions. And as we wrote the thing, we realized an awful lot of what we were writing was intuition, gut feelings, anecdotal evidence, not a whole lot of science behind any of it, right? Which made it really hard to stand behind it and say, yes, you should do that, right? Because we really didn't have any data to support a darn thing we wrote in it. But, right, we had to do something, and so we put it out, and then this document ends up becoming a pretty strong basis for any student that comes to my lab that wants to do something. I said, poke a hole in that somewhere. There's a testable hypothesis, and so that's kind of what we've gone after. So the big things that we laid out in that document were to shorten swine exhibitions. We could prevent interfair movements because we knew we were getting the same virus at multiple places. We could vaccinate the pigs, and we could talk all day long about that one. And then this idea of minimize human exposure. And so the idea around minimize human exposure, right, we've all been to theme parks, right, amusement parks. Every ride has a sign in front of it that says, right, if you have these conditions, this may not be the ride for you. Really didn't have much of that going on around agricultural fairs, and the idea that maybe we could do some of that. In fact, we've since then had lawsuits to fairs about, that they didn't warn me of the risks and my kid got infected and all that sort of stuff. So some of that probably certainly needs to occur. we'll start with this whole shortened swine exhibitions thing, right? In the measures to minimize, we wrote this really lovely shortened swine exhibitions down to 72 hours. And if you ask where it came from Indiana Board of Animal Health. Dr. Brett Marsh crafted that in the heat of the battle, and we said, "Hey, Dr. Marsh, where did that come from?" And his response was, "Sounded good to me." So, right, like, we didn't really have anything to stand behind, and you know, if you don't know, trying to change the schedule of a fair, it's easier to change the rotation of this plant than it is to change the way we've always done it, and so we really needed some hard evidence to support that. So what we did, we set off to sample pigs at fairs. So we enrolled county fairs in this study, and so we had 8 fairs that we picked. They were our likely suspects, right? Places we find flu a lot. We enrolled them in the fair, and the plan was we were going to sample every pig every day at these fairs, right? Can we see what's going on? And so we did that, and we did it 2 years in a row, right? Because we just enjoying the punishment of this. And so we ended up sampling, you know, almost 7,000 pigs through it. Overall, we get about 14% of the pigs testing positive. We find flu at 7 of our 16 fair events. Remember, 8 each year, so 16 fair events. We end up with sustained flu transmission at 5 of those. So 2 of them, we pick up a flu-positive pig, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere. So within those 5, where we really have transmission, right, the overall prevalence at the end of the fair, we didn't alter the fair at all, right? It happened the way it happened. 49% of the pigs testing positive, which is really pretty close to what we see right in our normal surveillance. So we thought this really mimics what we're seeing. All right, if we'd ended the fairs at 72 hours, if we'd ended the pig show at 72 hours, proportion of positive pigs would have been less than 18%. I don't know what the magic number is to prevent transmission, but that's certainly a decrease, right? We would have had less viral burden in the environment had we cut it off earlier. So to see it in graphical form, right? Here's kind of our timeline of these fairs. So everybody down here on the hours post arrival. So right, time pigs had to be in place all the way through to the end of the fair event. Percent of pigs testing positive for flu virus along the y-axis, right? And you can see this lovely trend towards right. This is bad, right? That's almost every pig testing positive at the end of that fair. Dotted line showing 72 hours. So had we cut it off at 72 hours, right, even that worst case fair, we're still down into like 30% of the pigs testing positive. We know that when we have human cases, it seems to be associated with this, right? We get a few hundred pigs shedding flu virus in the environment. Somebody's going to get infected. We're going to end up with human cases. If we can decrease it back down, right, that likelihood would be a lot better. So out of this, we kind of conclude, yeah, you know, 72 hours probably is a good recommendation. It's as good as anything. CDC becomes pretty comfortable with this, and then we start promoting this idea of 72 hours. How that's being interpreted by various places is all over the board, but nonetheless, right, we get the idea shorter is better. So, you know, we get the fairs, could I go 80 hours? Sure, just realize where you're at on the graph, right, and you know, risk is probably increasing over time. Go back. So, notice this fun anomaly here, right? These two start high, and they both kind of trend high. So when we're looking at this, the 2 purples are the same fair, just 2 different years, right? Same greens are the same fair. This we thought was really odd. Like that's really high. I don't really think that 50% of the pigs came into those fairs with flu. However, right, at the next sampling, they've all dropped way back down. But there's something unique about that happens, and then we end up with an awful lot of pigs infected at the end. And so we had a working hypothesis in this that this is the true prevalence, and this was due to our sampling artifact. And so the first time we could actually sample the pigs is when we knew who they were. Since we were doing every pig every day, we were tracking each pig. We needed to know which pig it was when we sampled it. And so these fairs, they didn't identify the pigs until they came to the fair. Oh, power. Go find power somewhere. Oh, right there. management practice that maybe is contributing to this, and so we evaluated it. So if you don't know right there, they're running pigs through a chute system where they're tagging them, they're scanning their loin eye size, they're weighing them, they're doing all sorts of fun things as they're coming through the chute. And we said we think this might contribute to it, so we were wiping pigs' noses once they had an ear tag, and we decided these surfaces might play a role too, so we started wiping the surfaces as they were coming through the chute system. In the second year of the project, we really kind of focused in on this. And so here's one of our weigh-in events. You can take your pick. This happens multiple times. So weigh-in started at 8 o'clock in the morning, right there weighing pigs all morning long. PCR values, so lower number, stronger positive. Blue dots are pigs. Green shapes are the different surfaces along the way, and when they're red, they have virus isolation positive. Right, so we've got pigs coming through. We started, right, we're weighing pigs. Everything's looking good. Pretty much everybody's negative. We get some of these weird anomalies. Those are probably false positives. And then right about 10:30, the bottom falls out, right? And we get positive pigs. And from there on to the rest of the way in, everybody's tested positive, right? I don't believe that some magical thing happened that all the positive pigs decided to group up and come through together, right? Our belief in this is that a couple positive pigs came through, deposited nasal secretions on the chute system, and then every pig that came through after that hit their snout on it, right, and then got flu virus put on their snout as they came through the chute system. Right, so instead of this idea of transmission occurring from one pig in a pen to its neighbor and then from its neighbors to its neighbors, right, essentially we said, hey, welcome to the fair and have some flu on your nose, right? And we did it to a couple hundred pigs. So we certainly think that this system probably enhances, right, how quickly we get viral spread through the group of pigs. If we didn't have this occurring, right, flu would still be there, it'd have to spread, but it wouldn't spread nearly as efficiently as this whole, right, line pigs up head to tail coming through, and once one of them snots up the board, right, everybody behind it is getting it. And you can see we're growing live virus off of those surfaces, you know, essentially for the rest of the way. So we know we've got viable virus on those surfaces. So maybe we can't shorten down the fair. Maybe we can shorten it down a little bit, but maybe this is another thing we could add to the menu for fairs to do or shows to do is not, you know, weigh pigs in this manner where we're going to, you know, have some sort of dissemination of virus in a rapid time scale. If we look at 2016, and I'm just going to use this year, the 2016 year, because it's kind of wrapped up, everything's put to bed on it. In that year, we end up with 18 H3N2V cases, so 18 people infected with swine lineage virus. It was linked to 7 different fairs across Ohio and Michigan. 6 of those 7 fairs were participating in our surveillance system. I felt like I was really good at predicting flu, right? Like, awesome. Like, that's, if I can predict flu at that level all the time, right, I could probably have a small island in the Caribbean. But that year, right, we were hitting it. What we also know is where we have these cases occurring, right, the prevalence within those fairs was high, right? Almost 80% of the pigs at the end of those shows were infected with flu, and that's where we end up getting human cases. And so this point of, right, the high prevalence leads to human infections, what we should do something about, right, that's kind of reinforced up there. It ends up getting, right, written up into MWR, CDC's, you know, holding it up again that we've got these cases occurring. So if we look at what we had occur in that year, here we've got all the isolates. So human isolates are circles, swine isolates are squares, and then they're color-coded by the fair. We've got the collection date down here, and if you can't see, we're starting on July 26th, and we're ending on August 19th. So very, rather small time scale. This is across Ohio and Michigan. We have 2 different viruses introduced. This human-like H3 was actually the 2010-2011 human seasonal virus. It was introduced, first picked up in pigs in Missouri, in commercial pigs. It takes till 2016 for it to end up in the county, or in the exhibition swine, or it's then spilling back in humans. Obviously, it reassorted along the way, but nonetheless, right, we can trace it back to that. So that was the first documented zoonosis of that genotype. But if we look at kind of all of this occurring, right, it's happening in this really short time scale. It's happening across a large geographic area. for the most part, without our active surveillance, we just have the human cases, but you can see they come right after our surveillance collection date. A few days later, we're getting the human cases. That's because it's the high proportion of pigs at the fair that's positive, and then we get the spillover infected humans, right? And then you got to be sick long enough to go seek medical care and all that sort of stuff. Nonetheless, right, we're able to trace them back to these fairs, right? Because we've got that surveillance of the pigs in place. When we look at this, we say, how in the world do we get this, right? I mean, you don't have to be a rock star in genetics to say those are all the same, right? Like, they're all nearly identical, and they're across this large geographic time scale within a month. Like, how does that happen? I don't think I've got county fair pigs going to 4 different county fairs in Ohio and hitting up county fairs in Michigan. Like, they move, but I don't think they're moving that much. And so it really led us to start asking questions about what's going on with how we're getting viruses disseminated rapidly in a large geographic scale. If we step back and look at the rest of our surveillance in 2016, it's not just those 6 county fairs, right? In fact, we look across the rest of it. The grays are the negative, but if it's colored red, it's going to have flu virus at it. There's plenty of flu virus on the landscape that year. And in fact, there's plenty of the exact same virus. Indiana had plenty of it. They didn't have any human cases, right? Maybe they're doing something differently, but there's plenty of flu virus, the exact same strain out there. So really, right, begs the question, how do we get the same virus across this large geographic scale in a very short order? And so to that, you have to kind of understand the pig network. And so we've been really focused on county fairs. That's where all this transmission is occurring, at least the zoonotic transmission. We also have state-level jackpot shows, and then we also have national-level jackpot shows. Right? So the jackpot shows are a place where people can come and they can show their pigs and win prize money. You can show it before the county fair. You might even after the county fair, but nonetheless, you get these different tiers of shows, and you get folks participating. Certainly, a lot more people are participating in county fairs. Right, a couple pigs in the backyard, and they just go to the county fair. But then we have some that'll go to a state show, and some that are out showing all the time and going to national jackpot shows. So we're trying to understand how much the show pigs in this country actually move. And so we started following the jackpot circuit. And so we went to jackpot shows and we asked folks where they were from, just a zip code. And then we also sampled their pig. And so right, in this, we start to follow how much these pigs are moving. And so if you don't know, in the spring, they kind of have a circuit. So kind of late April, the circuits start, and then follow on through right up until county fair season starts, and then the county fair season is off and rolling. And so we said, let's figure out how much these pigs are moving. So we start following pigs at these, and you can see we get various degrees of participation across the states. Ohio, we get to go to every circuit show that happens, and you can see we start to get this idea that for the most part, everybody's kind of staying in their state. Yeah, we get a few that jump state lines for a particular show, but we're moving. You can also find nodes where they're going to every single show, right? Like there's a farm, there's a zip code here that there's pigs going to every single show. I don't know if it's the same farm or it's the same pigs, but they're certainly involved in a lot of these. So the jackpot season's working along. We get to week 6, and then we have this fun event occur. Right, so a very large pig show a national pig show in Iowa, and we get an awful lot of pig movement. Pigs going out to that show to participate, and then from there, they come back home, and then we still have the county or the state level jackpot circuit occurring. It continues to roll along. We have another national level jackpot show, right, and then we have another national level jackpot show. Holy smokes! Right, like these pigs are moving. They're moving a lot. We talk about commercial pigs moving. Yeah, they move from like North Carolina to Iowa, but then they stay in a barn until they go to market. Right, this is a back and forth, like every weekend, pigs on the road. If we line up the flu positives in this thing, right, we can suddenly see how we disseminate virus very quickly through this network. right? And so out of this, we got 12.5% of pigs positive, which doesn't seem that bad. But realize these pigs then end up, right, so we won't show it on the time scale because that would identify the guilty parties, right, who kicks this whole thing off. But you can see it starts to amplify back, they get to a certain show, right, and then it disseminates from there. And you can get the idea that then some of those pigs become a pig that goes to their county fair. They're the 1 or 2% at the county fair that then initiates the problem there. And so if we're going to control the problem, we've got to go all the way back into, right, understanding the jackpot system. Where can we leverage transmission controls in the jackpot system to ultimately protect county fairs so that we then protect public health. If we look at the Ohio circuit, because we were able to follow them all the way through it, right, week 1, we pick out one positive pig. You can see it builds. It's a really nice, beautiful epi curve for all the epidemiologists, right? That's great. And then right, we're following this H1N2. It's almost back out of the population. And then remember, week 6 was the big national show. So we had Ohio pigs go out to the national show. They come back with this new virus. Right? They come back with an H3N2. It starts to amplify up. This black line is designated when county fair season started in Ohio. So county fairs are starting. This virus we find here in week 8 is essentially the same virus we find infecting people, right, 6 weeks later at county fairs. So, right, Ohio, at least in our surveillance, we didn't detect it up until after that big show. It comes back, it gets disseminated through the jackpot network. It's in the county fairs. There's more shows, right, and then we disseminate it through that route. So we feel fairly confident that we're starting to understand the idea of how we can disseminate it. If you want to put a really scary thought on the whole thing, right, picture that with like African swine fever, right? Like, holy smokes, right? Like, it could move really, really fast. If we look at the isolates, right, we start to get some idea that we have distinct lineages, and for whatever reason, some of them kind of take off and go, and other ones don't. And so, right, if you're kind of looking at these things, we get some of them that we get these minor introductions, and they hang out, they don't seem to go anywhere, or we get a major introduction that's in multiple shows, right? And so for whatever reason, right, some of them outcompete. We could probably spend quite some bit of time trying to understand why certain viruses outcompete others. Some of it probably has an awful lot to do with immunity, vaccines being used, and those sorts of things. So we know that this pig movement allows long-scale dissemination of viruses, right? We know we've got this weird complex network of pig shows, and some of those shows, right, pigs go back to their farm, they can certainly transmit between pigs on the farm, and then, right, some of those pigs may go on to another show. And so, right, this whole complicated network of understanding how we could potentially intervene and stop transmission. Just want to mention this was a collaboration we did with CDC. Just published in Hemisphere. If you're bored tonight and need to sleep, you can read about it. So we were using mid-ion sequencing at a pig show so that we could actually sequence in the field. Ended up, right, detecting an outbreak of a virus that eventually goes on downstream and infects people a month later. But nonetheless, right, we're getting to the idea of how can we detect this earlier so that we can have interventions, and we're not just sitting around after the fact, piecing it together. So the idea of sequencing the field and trying to figure out what we're in the middle of, we might get some idea of how scared we should be or not. Right. So one of the other things we came up with in that measures to minimize was, should we vaccinate the pigs or not? So this is work my grad student just finished up. In fact, he's got to get it next week. Here we vaccinated pigs with some of the commercially available vaccines. And so if you don't know, there's a killed virus vaccine on the market. There's a live attenuated vaccine, and then we included the sham. Take your pick of any of these. Right, any of the vaccines certainly decrease shedding compared to the sham. Interestingly enough, and I don't have the slide to show you, we co-housed naive ferrets with these pigs as a surrogate for humans. The ferrets that were exposed to the pigs that had been vaccinated with the live attenuated didn't get as sick. They didn't shed as much virus. We seemed to decrease transmission between pigs and ferrets if they were vaccinated with live attenuated. So while here on this curve, right, the shedding looks pretty similar between the two viruses, and granted, the strain we use is mismatched to both vaccines. If we look at the next health outcome to ferrets, right, live attenuate, it seems to have a positive effect for us that we don't transmit virus, at least as efficiently on after that exposure. If we look at kind of that idea of how do we minimize exposure, right, I had an MPH student who's really interested in, kind of public health messaging, and so went out looking for hand hygiene stations, right? This has been a general recommendation from CDC that we have hand hygiene stations at agricultural fairs, and so we went out to try to assess, are they actually there, are they working? So yeah, for the most part, right, most fairs have hand hygiene stations. Most of them work. Do they have risk signage that's trending down? Do they tell you how to wash your hands? You think you wouldn't need it, but right, that's still one of those things we recommend. Right, trends down even more from there. We couldn't leave long enough alone, right? So we decided to sit there and watch if people actually use these hand hygiene stations. And so we sat and watched people leaving, and at the end of the day, only 7% of the people actually use the hand hygiene station. So, right, we've got them there. The fairs are putting them there. Right, we even have signs in front of it. And just to be clear, this was a very conservative, like, if a kid was in and out of the barn, or if they looked like they carried stuff to the truck, like, we didn't count those. We were counting people who actually legitimately looked like they were visiting the barn and then leaving the animal area, right? We should have included demographics of who actually washes their hands, because for the most part, it's moms making kids wash hands, and everybody else is too cool for school and stands there and doesn't touch the thing. But right, very, very low number of people actually use those hand hygiene stations, even though a blanket recommendation to put them there. However, right, we decided we should swab those things while we're at it, right? And so we didn't pick up any flu on the hand hygiene stations, but almost 70% of them had antimicrobial resistant bacteria on them, right? And cephalosporin resistant, fluoroquinolone resistant, right? Nasty bugs on, right? Almost 70% of them. So, I mean, maybe this 93% are right, and you shouldn't touch those things, right? So, the recommendation that's kind of coming forward now is that we promote the ones that you don't actually have to touch, right? The motion sensor ones, just because we do seem to be getting a fair bit of contamination on those hand hygiene stations. Signage is one of these things that, every public health department says, what are we going to do about the outbreaks? And they're like, we're going to improve our signage. Yeah, that's the universal public health response. So this is one of my favorites. This is I throw them under the bus. It's the Ohio Department of Health. Right? They made this lovely sign about don't bring strollers, sippy cups, pacifiers into the barn. Right, and we captured this picture of this lady pushing her stroller, sippy cups, pacifiers, kids, right past the sign, right on into the barn. I mean, granted, it's a white sign on the white barn, and clearly public health has their priority straight, because you see the no smoking sign is much larger, right? And so you get the idea that, right, signage probably isn't working. Right? Some of the most effective signs we've seen have been pieces of plywood that they just spray painted no eating in the barn and stuck it in the middle of the aisle. Right? People see those. These things, I think, just nobody's really paying any attention to, and some of it is probably also perceived risk, and do they really recognize that sort of thing. So while we have lots of these recommendations, right, we've had a lot of interest around, do the exhibitors actually think this is a good idea? Can they do it? Do they care? Do they think we're off our rockers? And so we did some surveys of these folks. Realize these are the folks that are really going showing. If we asked them, in the survey, we asked them how many shows they planned to attend in that year, they were going to go to 11 on average. Right? Some of them were 50 shows. Every weekend, we're going to a show. Right? So these are folks that really show a lot. So we thought, our general thought has been, if they get on board with some of the mitigation strategies, it will trickle down. Right? If we can get them to affect change, then maybe everybody else will do it too. So through this, right, we kind of asked them, is it a good recommendation? Could they implement it? Did they already do it? So we kind of broke everything out. We don't need to read all of that. But no food or drink in animal areas is one that for sure we've got some disagreement with whether that's a good idea or not from the exhibitors. That being said, CDC might be backing off on this because when they came to do their in-field sequencing with us, they got very hot in the barn and they wanted a drink. And I reminded them that you're not supposed to eat or drink in the barn. And suddenly they had a different view of that thing. So we might, we're getting a little bit understanding of kind of why some of these things are occurring. The other kind of things that pop out here, that we shouldn't bring sick pigs and people to the show. Everybody thinks that's a good recommendation. They say they could do it, But then when we get to this idea, interestingly enough, sick people, So this is, are you staying home when you're sick, Like pigs and people, we get a little bit of a differential there. So, we're keeping maybe sick pigs home more than we're keeping sick people home. And then we also have this idea of no sleeping in the animal areas, which seems to be a bit of a problem. And of course, the idea of reporting sick animals, nobody's going to do that, And so another one of those things we're just kind of trying to understand. So our goal in this has been we're getting all this knowledge, we need to disseminate it back. And so just to make you aware, if anybody's involved with any of this stuff, we've got some education stuff out there. We've written kind of swine disease or swine zoonotic disease chapters. In Ohio, we wrote this lovely chapter, put it at the 4-H, and then we asked people, what do you think of it? And no one knew it existed. And so we worked with the state fair to create a skeleton station. And so at the state fair, if you want points for your skeleton station, we now have a skeleton station around zoonotic diseases. And so suddenly everyone learns the chapter because there's points on the line, and that's competition, and you might win some money, And so, these are our little pigs that all have different diseases. If you can see the back end of that pig, it's got diarrhea. So you get the idea, They kind of have to match up, what the disease is, what could the cause of agent be, or they have to pick the appropriate PPE that they should be using in those situations. We also, my front slide was becoming a scientist, or the scientist logo. So we started this program with the Jackpot kids in Ohio. Basically, the idea is that we do education with them, and then during the Jackpot season, they're submitting selfies to us of them doing healthy habits, and we award them points for that. And because they have to put a little caption of what they're doing. And then once at the end of the season, when we have a big awards banquet, in addition to all the show pig prizes, we also give out scientist prizes. The grand prize is a new iPad, which is a strong motivator to kids to do this sort of stuff. So we get lots of pictures of random things. Washing hands, cleaning, disinfecting is coming through loud and clear. And here, this was somebody was getting blood drawn for a health paper. So they actually understood the idea that was a healthy behavior to decrease disease transmission. So when you see it becoming the scientist thing, that's kind of the stuff we're doing. The hands-on activities we do, we're big believers in hands-on activity and experiential learning, and so we're going and doing activities with them, whether they're we set up a mock scientist laboratory. This was Closure, and nothing like kids to peer pressure adults into seeing how well they can wash their hands and mobile hand wash stations. So just some other ideas of our scientist laboratory that we'll go and set up at shows, and we try to get them into the idea. Not only does it help us with education, but it really helps us with buy-in for our surveillance, because now we're kind of immersed in the culture. An activity where we make slime with them, the running joke is when your nose is runny, you think it's funny, but it's not. And then they love to come make some slime with us and do all that fun stuff. Biosecurity buckets, we kind of give them the basic set of what you need to do for biosecurity on your farm, so disinfectants, boots, and kind of why you need all those things, coveralls. It's all set, ready to go, because kind of preach the message that when your pig gets sick, you're never going to be ready. You won't have all the stuff at the time. This was a kind of a tabletop exercise, but for kids. Then we did kind of talking about how pigs move and all that sort of fun stuff, and how we can control the disease movement. ATP tests, so we're taking real science out, and so this is an ATP swab, just like they use in food hygiene. We give the kids a swab and tell them to go find the dirtiest thing and the cleanest thing that they can find. Amazing what they find to stick a swab into. But they get the idea of it. And what's interesting about this is suddenly they get the idea that this is useful information to them, and so we'll do it one week at a show, and the next week at the show, they come up to us and they want to swab because they say, you know what, I cleaned and disinfected my show equipment after last week's show, and I want to know how clean it is. Right, and so they're getting the idea that, am I doing a good job, and I told Dad I should do this, and so they're starting to kind of grasp the idea that these things are effective. And just wrapping it up here, these are our sick pigs, and so for all the swine vets in the room, right, that pig has erysipelas, right, and so this pig you can't really tell. He's got nasal discharge. He's a little sunken in. He had exploratory surgery when we kind of pulled some stuffing out, pulled in his side, and shoved a Bluetooth speaker up in his snout so he coughs too. And so they get the idea that they got sick pigs. What PPE should they be putting on, and kind of dealing with all that fun stuff. The only way we can get older kids involved is to involve needles for some odd reason. And so teach them how to vaccinate an orange, and suddenly they come running. The stuffed pigs don't seem to do it, but again, the idea that you can vaccinate your animals and improve health. And the last thing we've got is this kind of poster session thing that we're doing at the state fair with them, and so they're competing and winning awards around their kind of ideas of trying to inform public about biosecurity. So with that, I'll stop, take any questions. If you want to talk to me, feel free to shoot an email, call, any of those sorts of things. Yeah.
Andy, what would make sense from a regulatory standpoint as far as vaccination, length of time before we show for a CBI, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, and we get that question a lot, CBI before the show I think is hard, right, because we know how much they're moving. And so exposures are probably happening even within that time frame. Even haul out to World Pork Expo when it was in Iowa, like we would follow trailers and there was a show on the way, they'd stop and show, and then but they were still under their CBI, right, to go to Iowa. Like they're moving on that sort of stuff. Vaccine is an interesting one. We continue to wrestle with that. We see some fairs mandating vaccine. We see some fairs doing a hauling clinic for vaccine. At this point, I don't see that there's any harm to vaccine. The one issue we've had is with the live attenuated, if you're going to use it. So we had a show that wanted to use it like upon entry, and we know we've got reassortment occurring with that vaccine strain with the wild type virus. So not the place to use it, right? You're going to have to get it out in front, not to mention you've got withdrawal time issues. But we certainly see the vaccine thing. We're starting to push that a little harder, mandate some sort of vaccine, right? Like, we could get into long debate about does vaccine drive viral evolution and whatnot. I think that's not the issue in this, right? This is public interface. You got to do something. Vaccine's probably as good as anything, right? I have to assume virus is going to show up. I have to assume it's going to show up. And so how can I limit that transmission? I can shorten it down, which some shows you can't do, right? Big shows, we're showing thousands of pigs, it's going to happen. It's going to be a week. So vaccine's a good one. National Swine Industry adopted vaccine. Didn't say which product, which at this point is probably fine, but at least you got to have some vaccine to come to their shows. I think that's probably a pretty decent recommendation, especially not mandating a specific product. How you get into them, that's a problem, right? If it's a small county fair, 1 or 2 pigs owned by an exhibitor, and it's only a 50-dose bottle, you certainly hear the balk about, I don't want to have to buy 50 doses for 2 pigs. But, right, club can go together and buy it. There's multiple ways you can work around that. Don't know if that can really solve the problem, but.
So, you showed in the one slide H1N1 occurring at the start of the surveillance, and then H3N2, maybe H1N2, and then H3N2 at the end. So you've got co-circulation of these viruses. Is there any? Do they follow the same trucks going back and forth from jackpot to jackpot?
Yes, we don't know that because through the jackpot network, we haven't followed individual pigs. Certainly where we're moving is to enroll individual pigs, follow them, see what their longitudinal responses are to these repeated exposures. I mean, there's all sorts of questions that we could answer around that. applicable to universal flu vaccine stuff. Right? What are repeated exposures look like? We do know that at shows, at large shows, we'll see 3, 4, 5 different strains co-circulating in the show, right? And so then we're getting, we've had some where we've had novel reassortments occur in the show, and then we can follow that novel reassortment downstream, right? And we'll pick it up later on. So, right, as much as we talk about the pig being the mixing vessel, these shows are as much the mixing vessel as the pig itself. Yeah.
I know it gets super, super hot in the barns in the summer, especially at World War. But is there any way to maybe like adjust their stabling situation so that they can't so that you can maybe reduce transmission to the stabling situation?
Yeah, and we've kind of had that thought. There's also talk about airflow. So we've worked with Michigan State a little bit. They're trying to come up with recommendations for like everyone point the fans in one direction, like so we get like total ventilation through this thing. I don't know if we'll get there or not, but it's interesting. We've seen people grasp on that idea. So we were at Illinois State Fair this year, and there was a whole club on the center aisle, and they had put barriers up along the edge, and I asked them why, and they said, well, we think all the other pigs are going to come by here and contact with our pigs, so they went to Lowe's about plywood and stuff on there. So I mean, they're getting that idea. I don't know if we have any data. I mean, part of me says once you got 1,000 pigs in a spot, right? They're moving around and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, it's hard to recommend anything at this point in time, just because we haven't really looked at it.
But I mean, if they're all catching it off of the immediate gate and shoot, then
Yeah,
also
so
maybe disinfect after.
yeah, so we've made recommendations around that about trying to clean and disinfect through those common, right, use things. Maybe you can't swap it, right? Maybe you can't get into every pig because we had one fair go terribly wrong. Like they were spraying bleach on it, like they pump sprayer between every pig, right? And then the floor was really slick and pigs were falling and all that sort of stuff. But like, you know, every 10 or 15 animals, could you do something? At least you wouldn't get the whole line of them. You'd break it up. And so some of those fairs, you know, I think we see them kind of trying to do some of that. I think at the end of the day, all these recommendations are kind of a menu of options, and right, ultimately a veterinarian might need to work with the fairs and say like, this would work for you, this maybe doesn't work for you, you know, and those sorts of things. Because you know, we certainly, right, there's some of those fairs where they only have like 10 pigs, and like, but we see them implementing like full board, and I'm like, well, the risk here is super low, right? But then we see other fairs where we find flu every year, and they don't seem to do anything, right? So right, some of that sort of stuff can certainly, at least from that menu, choose some things and do them. It doesn't have to be all or none. Yeah.
Have you seen any change in the incidence of human cases with the biosecurity things that have been in the outreach you've done?
So human cases have dropped, but we didn't have any human cases this past year. So I'm taking full credit and going to retire now because we solved the problem. Now it was the lowest flu. 2019 was our lowest flu year so far. I'd like to say it's biosecurity and all the education, but my gut tells me it's the nature of flu, and like 2020 will be horrible. But who knows? We do see, right, at least the more awareness, and we've got plenty of data around that, and we've got awareness around it. So we think that some of that probably has to do with some of it. We also know that the number of cases probably also linked to a particular state's health department, how gung-ho they are trying to find cases, right? So the year that Indiana didn't have any, they were in between flu coordinators in the summer, right? Probably ties to why we don't find any cases, right? And we know some folks in Michigan who, you know, basically have told their kids that you're not that sick, you don't need to go get medical attention. So, right, it's probably some of, you know, using the benchmark of documented cases as are we making progress or not might be tough. So, right, we're going to try to follow some youth exhibitors through their exhibition website and see how frequently they're really being exposed to flu.
I have one last question. What's the transmission link between the producer and the show pig?
So the link between commercial farms and show pigs, interesting when we did an older survey and we asked folks about do they have commercial pigs on their farm or do they have a family member who works in commercial farms, and somewhere between 15 and 20% of them will say that they have commercial pigs on the same premise as their show pigs, and then like another 25% of them have someone in their family, in their household, who works at a commercial premise. Minnesota did a survey a few years ago and they had like 47%, right? So there's definitely some link, and you think about like whose kids are showing pigs, it's probably, you got a link to swine production somewhere, right? Whether that was family generations or current. We also know, I mean, you can walk in some of these barns and you see what are clearly commercial pigs, somebody pulled out of the commercial barn and brought to the fair, right? Like that happens. And so probably some of that link also occurs.
Other questions? Oh, Bob has one more.
What would a timeline look like from exposure, incubation period, clinical signs to shedding virus and stopping shedding virus?
So we can pick up PCR about 24 hours, maybe even shorter after they've been exposed. And they, like in the vaccine study one, right? They shed out to 14 days. At least unvaccinates did. The vaccinates quit around day 10. Certainly, some folks talk about longer, right? And it also depends on how immunologically homogeneous the group is, right? So if the virus can find some places and pockets to keep moving through, they'll persist it longer in a group. But if you look at an individual pig, by about 2 weeks they ought to be done shedding.
Was your cutoff point on the CT scale at roughly 40?
Yep, on the way or on those, yeah, it was 37. So a fairly, normal cutoff scale. Is it infectious or not? Probably not at that end. Like you could shift it back a few days, but nonetheless, right, there's still plenty of virus coming out of them for 10 days or so, which has kind of gone to this idea, we had the idea of a 7-day downtime, which was in the measures to minimize. The idea there was that we'd actually see someone would see a sick pig and not take it to a show. There's probably a major faulty assumption that they would not take it to a show. We've done that education training, like those sick pigs coughing, and like in the scenario, we kind of say, it's the day before you go to the show, the pig's coughing, they take its temperature, and then, this one little kid, I remember, I'm like, so would you take it to the show? And he's like, well, is it my best guilt or not? And like, right, there's the reality, right? Like, if it's the good one, it's gonna go. Hopefully it's done shed, it's good enough to show. So, as much as we educate around some of that stuff, I think we never get around it.
Or I saw one more hand over there. Well, if